Swamiji, can you talk about surrender to God's will?
Please repeat the question.
Can you talk
about surrender to God's will? Surrender.
Talk about it. Surrender to God's will means first to accept God's power as absolute. Absolute means there is only one power, and that is God's power. That power is working everywhere through the innumerable forms He has created. It is by God's will the trees are growing, trees are bearing fruits. It is by God's will men and women or beings, creatures are active. So it is His will that is working everywhere. It is His power that makes the entire universe active. We must be conscious of this. It means we must be conscious that God's power alone is working through all so-called individuals and everywhere in the universe. But unfortunately, what happens is we do certain things and we assume the responsibility of doing those things, whereas the actual power to do those things is coming from God Himself seated in our heart. It means the power that makes our body active is God Himself. We forget that and we assume the sense of doership because of the ego sense. That ego sense has come into being because of ignorance. That ignorance has to be removed by our spiritual practices. The practice is to say that, oh Lord, everything is yourself. Your power alone is absolute. I as a separate being is nothing. You alone are everything. In that way, if we try to accept that God's power is absolute, we will be able to eliminate our ego gradually and become ultimately egoless. A man who is absolutely egoless means a saint who has realized his oneness with God will be able to feel that whatever is done through his body is done by God Himself through that body. Those who are in a state of ignorance will feel that as individuals they are doing it. Because of the sense of doership, they have to suffer the results of their actions, good or bad. This leads them to the chain of birth and death. So if we make our surrender complete and have no sense of doership, we will be completely free from the chain of birth and death. We will attain liberation once for all. Surrender does not merely mean giving up our possessions and relations and all that. It means giving up the sense of I-ness and mine-ness. I-ness and mine-ness comes out of the ego sense. When the ego sense is gradually eradicated, the sense of I-ness and mine-ness will disappear. We'll be able to say everything belongs to God. Everything is God, everything belongs to God. If, say, I possess a lot of property, I should, in the proper way, feel that the property belongs to God. God has entrusted everything to me. to manage it as a trustee. And if these things are taken away, I should only feel that God, who had entrusted to me, has now called them back. We should not feel a tinge of disappointment when things we possess are taken away from us. You have perfect detachment. Is it clear? Any other question about it?
How are we to encourage to practice that practically?
Practical means first you are told that everything is God's power is absolute. You should practice saying that, oh Lord, you are everything. Your power is absolute. That way, bring to your mind very often this truth and tell God, I am nothing, O Lord, you are everything. I am nothing, O Lord, you are everything. Finally, you should also stop using the word I. Only say you are everything, you are doing everything. Like that, the I will gradually be eliminated and you need not even mention that little I. Only the universal I will take its place. It's only practice, practice, practice. Those who are surrendered to God completely means accepted that whatever happens is happening by His will alone. If he gets a telegram today that his property worth, say, $100 million was destroyed by fire, he will not get upset over it. He will be able to say, God's will, God gave me, now God has taken it away. This will be his attitude towards the so-called loss. As it was mentioned a few days ago, King Janaka, who was a philosopher king, was presiding over a court, and news came to him that a part of his city was on fire. He did not get up and run away to save the city. He coolly continued his work. Whereas other people in the audience ran away to save their small things. They had kept them in the city. So, perfect surrender will help us to remain detached and happy and cheerful in all conditions and circumstances. If we are given food, we will be happy. If we are denied food one day, still we will remain happy. We will have no reason to complain. We will be able to say, God willed that I should fast today. God's will, we will be able to have perfect surrender only if we are able to accept the entire creation as God's own manifestation and also feel that everyone is acting, being prompted by God in each and every form. This is the foundation for perfect surrender to God's will. Means constant remembrance of God and acceptance that the entire creation is God's own form. And it is God who is working through all these forms. If this condition is fulfilled, surrender will be easy.
That means, Swami, someone insults you, that's also God. Suppose someone insults you or fights with you, that is also God fighting. Suppose someone quarrels with you.
Who is insulting you?
That God within that person.
Who is that person?
He is the form of Papa.
And why should you be upset over it? If you see him as form of Papa, you will be only happy that Papa has come to you in that form and is correcting you. You will not get upset over it. Surrender disappears from us the moment we forget God. Surrender, attitude of surrender can come to us only if we have God's remembrance and that everything is the form of God and God is working through everybody. This consciousness has to be maintained constantly. Otherwise we are likely to forget God and make the individuals responsible for an act as blame them or praise them for whatever they have done. Often a question is asked, if we surrender to God, how can our daily activities go on? It means those who ask this question feel that by an attitude of surrender, we are supposed to keep quiet, sit quietly in a room without even moving our hands or legs. That is not surrender. That's not the attitude of surrender also. You do all your normal activities and be fully conscious that it is God who is working through you, making you do all such acts. There, the ego has no place.
Swamiji, that means when I read in one book, that is wrong what I read. I read in a book that God's power interferes in your life as much you allow it to be interfered, and if you don't want it to be interfered, then it doesn't interfere. So, but according to what you are saying, that everything is done by Him. So where is that partial part? It's fully done by Him. So that book is wrong. It was written in the book that God's power interferes in your life amount you allow it to be interfered. More than that it won't interfere. Then
it actually means this. your surrender is 50%. You give some respect to your ego and sometimes feel that I am doing this. Sometimes you feel that, oh, I am nothing. It is God who is doing everything. So at that time surrender is all right. But next moment you give the praise to the ego, feel that you are doing it. Until you are able to remove the ego completely, God will not work through you completely. The moment or to the extent you have cleared the ego, that much God will work through you. That is why they say the example of Sri Krishna is playing on the flute. Flute is made of bamboo. The bamboo must be made perfectly hollow. If it is not made 100% hollow, you cannot have the real sound as desired by the player of the flute. So we must become 100% hollow. It means remove our ego completely from us and allow Him to work through us.